7 on May 13th. We'll call the East Providence Planning Board meeting to order. Please rise to the pledge of allegiance. I'll note for the record that Mr. Grant is present, Mr. Cook is present, Rockwell is present, Lopes is present, and I am present. Forum. We have approval of planning board minutes, the April 8th, 2024 minutes included in our packet. I have two things I'd like to note. One was on page 3 of the minutes. There's a reference to the motion being to table the application 60 days or as long as needed. I realize that I'm only speaking for myself, but that was not my understanding. But I was pretty clear that I did not want the application to sit there indefinitely. I would not have supported a motion. I think the cleanest, easiest way to correct that in the minutes. I don't think that's. So I think the best way to do it is just to take out the language so that it would read that the board voted to table the application. That avoids us putting into tonight as to time period. If it looks like it's going. Okay, necessary. So that'd be my request, would be to modify it along those lines. And I also, I'm not certain that Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I wondered about that myself. If you'll recall, we made some adjustments in the guidelines, and those were adjustments that Mr. Miller had basically expressed he felt were needed. We made those changes, and at that point, he voted in support.
That was my recollection.
Yeah, we'll double check that.
As to your previous point, I don't know if you need a motion.
Well, we need a motion to
I'd be-
approve them, so I would just ask if you agree with.
I'll move to pass the minutes as amended.
Got a motion by Mr.
Aye.
Opposed? Under new business, jump right in. The first item is a request for a recommendation to the Waterfront Special Development District Commission and the Waterfront Commission Design Review Committee regarding consistency with the City of East Providence Comprehensive Plan and Subdivision and Land Development Review Regulations for Phase 1 of Metacomet Property LLC's application for a proposed mixed-use development located at 500 Veterans Memorial Parkway, Assessors Map 107, Block 15, Lot 1, and Map 107, Block 15, Lots 1 through 10. Council?
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. My name is Josh Berlinski. I'm an attorney with the firm of Darrow Everett, and I represent Metacomet Property LLC, an affiliate of Marshall Development in connection with this application. As members of this board may recall, we appeared before the board last month seeking a recommendation as to the project in general as its consistency with the comprehensive plan. This planning board correctly pointed out that there was work to be done in certain areas. We have undertaken and begun the process of following up on the mandates of this planning board, and we do intend to be back in short order to discuss the results and the further product that we've generated in response to those concerns. In the interim, however, as we stated when we submitted our application at the end of last year, it was always the hope of the applicant to open the 9-hole public golf course for public use in the summer of 2024. through the time and effort and expenses incurred by the applicant over the last 18 months. I'm happy to report that we do expect and hope to open a public golf course, 9 holes, for the public this summer, approvals permitting. So in furtherance of that goal, last week we appeared before the Design Review Committee of the Waterfront Commission, and we received a favorable recommendation for approval to full waterfront with the additional stipulation that the applicant and the public have an opportunity by the end of the year to sit down in a public setting and discuss the viability of walking paths. We agreed to that condition. We've made our position known on that issue, and Mr. McNeil, who I will introduce momentarily, can speak on that with some authority, but we're willing to have the conversation, and we've agreed to that. I thought it would be helpful at this juncture if, in order to assist the planning board in its determination this evening, which, as we mentioned, is to obtain a recommendation solely as it relates to the golf course, which we've identified as phase 1. If we kind of go over a brief history of the application and how we ended up here on this specific element, and some reports that have been issued in the interim since we submitted our application. And then I'm going to turn it over to Paul Pisano of Marshall Properties, who can speak with some specificity as to the phasing plan and the plan to operate the golf course, which I think this board might find useful. And then we're going to conclude with Robert McNeil, who is the architect for the revised golf course, which we've called MetLinks, and is also going to be responsible for operating the course going forward. And we have some pictures that we're going to share with you, and he's going to speak a little bit about how the course has progressed and what the opportunities that it's going to afford for both the citizens of East Providence, the residents of the state, and all fans of the game of golf. And we're really excited about this opportunity. We think it's going to have a positive impact on the community, and very excited to share our vision with this board and members of the public. So if we could start the presentation, please, on the slides. So really what we're doing here is I'm just going to bring forward some of the documents that have kind of demonstrate the travel of the development and highlight some items that have been brought to your attention previously. Not going to waste too much time, but just to confirm for the planning board that that we are of the opinion, and hopefully that you concur, that this element in particular complies with the comprehensive plan, seeing as how obviously Metacomet was a previously operating golf course, and we think that the phase 1 addresses significantly and substantively certain elements of the comprehensive plan. So we go to the next slide, please. So this is the zone change from 2021 for the former Metacomet golf course. As Mr. Crook and members of the board mentioned at our appearance last month, it went through various iterations. It was the board. We appeared before the board, and I think on more than one occasion, to discuss the progress of the concept. And ultimately, in 2021, the council approved this zone change. Can we go to the next slide, please? I specifically want to bring this board's attention to conditions 5 and 6 set forth in the zone change. Condition 5, and I'll read it for those of you that don't have their reading glasses on like myself. The property owner shall provide community benefits to the residents of East Providence in connection with the public golf course, including reduced green fees for municipal residents and complimentary reserved utilization of the course by the student athletes on the East Providence High School golf team. That's condition 5. Condition 6, the area marked C on the map here attached here to as addendum 1 shall only be used for the public golf course or for public green space. No building, as defined in the ordinance, shall be located on said area C other than buildings supporting the golf or green space use, such as a clubhouse, maintenance building, or restroom facilities. The foregoing perpetual restriction shall be evidenced by an instrument recorded in the East Providence Land Evidence Records. We go to the next slide, please. As I mentioned in my introductory remarks, we came before this board last month seeking a more broad recommendation. And we completely understand and agree with the mandates of this board that you required further information before you made that determination. But I did want to bring a couple of the points that the planning department referenced in their memo to you at that time. So if we go to the next slide, please. Again, the first pages are just provided for context. And this is the April 5th, 2024 memo that I believe Keith Brines of the East Providence Planning Department and Jim Moran prepared for your benefit. That's just an introductory page. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I'm just going to read particular provisions. In Roman 3, consistency with the 2010-2015 comprehensive plan. Second paragraph, the proposed land uses as described within the application narrative are in general compliance with the identified uses referenced in the Metacomet Subdistrict's use schedule within Chapter 19 zoning. Numerous elements in the comprehensive plan can be addressed and can be referenced in addressing the project's consistency with the comprehensive plan, including land use, circulation, community services and facilities, housing, natural resources, recreation and open space, community sustainability, and waterfront plan elements. In reviewing the proposal for consistency, planning has determined that the development proposal is consistent with the following goals and objectives described within the 2010-2015 East Providence Comprehensive Plan. Next slide, please. And again, these were some of the elements that, that the planning department confirmed the golf course satisfies as it relates to the comprehensive plan. Natural resource element goal 2.0, preserve private open lands in their natural state where possible to ensure their maintenance as wildlife and fish habitats, natural drainage areas, and areas of passive recreation and outdoor education. With the rezoning of the property, the developer has proposed a mixed-use development that includes a significant portion of acreage that will be preserved as private open space, primarily through the preservation of a portion of the property for the 9-hole public golf course. Natural Resources Goal 3.0, preserve and expand public access to the city's waterfront for passive and active recreational activities. As stated previously, the portion of the property that is to be retained for golf use will provide direct public access to Watchmancook Cove, a scenic tidal water body. The waterfront on this property was previously only accessible to private country club members of the Metacomet Golf Club. Objective 3.1, require pedestrian access to the waterfront as part of any private mixed-use development in waterfront areas. The development provides direct access to the cove, a coastal and scenic tidally influenced water body. The proposed 9-hole public golf course will immediately abut this cove and as such will provide ample pedestrian access to the public. Finally, Objective 7.1 under the recreation and open space element, continue to utilize the city's waterfront district development plan to guide responsible development in the waterfront district. Under this development of the comprehensive plan, this mixed-use proposal is consistent with the development goals and objectives identified for the Metacomet subdistrict in the overall waterfront plan. From the perspective of adequate open space provision and opportunities for the public, the development has proposed that a significant portion of the property be utilized as either privately owned open space through the retention of a 9-hole public golf course that was previously a private country club that restricted public access, or public open space through the dedication of municipally owned public open space through the donation of 9.6 acres of the site to the city of East Providence by the developer. Next slide, please. I only call this page to your attention with regard to the recreation and open space conclusion. Objective 6.2, support the continued operation and maintenance of the 3 private golf courses presently operating within the city. This 2010-2015 comprehensive plan objective recognizes the value of our city's golf courses and was written at a time when preservation of our private country clubs was and still remains a priority. In reviewing Metacomet's challenges in its final years before closure, the fiscal constraints associated with its continued operation, and the fiscal burden associated with the city moving to acquire the property through eminent domain, it is clear that the Metacomet Country Club experienced insurmountable challenges that eliminated the prospects of continuing the use of the property as a private country club or even as a standalone, privately owned public golf course facility. The property's private sale and subsequent request for a rezoning and comprehensive plan amendment by the property owner were thoroughly reviewed and received a legislative vote of the City Council. As such, the former Metacomet property now exists as a property that, from a general land use perspective, is consistent with the 2010-2015 comprehensive plan and the city's subdivision and land development review regulations. Next slide, please. Finally, the recommendation of the April 2024 Planning Memorandum. Based on the above analysis and review of the submitted development proposal, the Planning Department recommended that the Planning Board offered an advisory opinion to the DRC and Waterfront that the development as proposed is consistent with the purposes and intent of the city's 2010-2015 comprehensive plan based on recent plan modifications approved by the vote of the East Providence City Council. Again, I want to make clear that we understand the Planning Board voted to continue its approval or that the overall development plan complies with the comprehensive plan, and we are not seeking that at this time. At such time as we believe we are in possession of adequate information to allow you to make that determination, we will reappear for that express purpose. Next slide, please. Also, at the April 2024 Planning Board meeting, we presented the expert testimony of our planning consultant. Next slide. Sue Mara, as you may recall, was formerly a planner with the city of Pawtucket, and she is currently a project manager at Weston and Sampson. Next slide, please. I am attaching this slide solely because the zone change ordinance has a blurry picture of Area C, which is designated as the golf course, and this is a better version. So as you can see, what is described as Area A is now phases 2 and 3 of our application, which is the improved property. Area B is the approximately 9.6 acres that the applicant has agreed to donate to the city of East Providence to be maintained as open space in perpetuity. And Area C is the site of the proposed 9-hole golf course. Next slide, please. Amongst the various land use elements in the comprehensive plan that Sue identified, I wanted to bring a couple to your attention. In general, one of the directives of the comprehensive plan is to continue to maintain and enhance city parks, playgrounds, and open space properties. Sue's expert opinion was that this proposal satisfies that element by virtue of its inclusion of a golf course. In the land use element, Sue quoted the language about East Providence seeking to make development and investment decisions that promote economic development and broaden the tax base of the city, that enhance potential downtown and village centers, that provide a range of housing choices that maintain the density and character of existing neighborhoods, that provide recreation and open space, parks, playgrounds, and linkages, such as pedestrian paths and bikeways, that provide new opportunities for public access to the waterfront. And Sue's expert opinion, as you can see in the corresponding comment on the next slide, is that the 9-hole golf course satisfied this element as well. Finally, in land use goals and objectives, Goal 1.0, which ensured that remaining vacant land of redeveloped parcels in the city is used for the maximum benefit to the community and are of high quality design and in character with the adjoining parcels and neighborhood. Sue noted that the proposed development will result in increased tax base, additional open space, and recreation opportunities for the direct benefit of the community. Next slide, please. One of the additional elements that Sue noted is that every mixed-use development, according to the comprehensive plan, should in the aggregate provide a self-sustaining mix of commercial, residential, institutional, light industrial, civic, and recreational uses, again, satisfied by virtue of the inclusion of the public 9-hole golf course. Next slide, please. This was the conclusion in Sue's report. The city of East Providence has presented a clear and realistic vision for land development throughout its zoning ordinance and comprehensive plan. The waterfront district was designed and created over 15 years ago to express a clear vision for redevelopment opportunities for the city. East Providence approved an amendment to the zoning ordinance and comprehensive plan in 2021, which established the Metacomet subdistrict as part of the waterfront district. This proposed development is consistent with the Metacomet subdistrict zone, as well as the future land use map in the comprehensive plan. In addition, as demonstrated in this report, the proposed development is consistent with several of the goals and objectives in the 2010-2015 comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. All right. Next, I'm going to call up Paul Pisano of Marshall Properties. He is going to provide a brief summary of the phasing plan in greater detail, as well as explain how golf is going to operate in the interim while the greater development undergoes further permitting. Paul?
I do. Paul Pisano. Thank you, Josh. Mr. Chairman, member of the board, my name's Paul Pisano. I've worked with Marshall Properties for over 15 years, and I've been involved with this proposed development since the property was purchased in 2020. It is my pleasure to be in front of you this evening to talk about the public golf component of our proposed development and what we are referring to as Phase 1. I was going to give a little bit of a history on how we got to where we were, but I think Josh did a very good job of explaining the different areas of the property, specifically A, B, and C. So I will skip directly to the subject matter this evening. So tonight, I'm going to speak specifically to our Phase 1 and the improvements required on site in order to operate a public golf course for the summer. When I conclude, I will call Robert McNeil, who was our current golf course architect, who designed and participated in the improvements that were implemented over the last year. As noted, Robert's not only our golf course architect, but he will be the golf course operating manager. And as you'll hear, Robert has a wealth of golf experience. Next slide, please. Many of you received or have referenced the golf course supplemental submission we submitted to the DRC. What I'd like to do tonight is to start by calling your attention to the next slide, EX01, phasing exhibit, and briefly give a review. Phase 1, as outlined, is intended to roughly delineate the area of the golf, which was also referred to as Area C when the Metacomet subdistrict was created. This area represents the area that has the right to be used for public golf exclusively, as outlined in that Metacomet subdistrict. The proposed improvements as defined on the subsequent slides, EX03 and EX04, are proposed to support the Phase 1 golf that occurs in this area. It's important to note, Phase 1 scope includes all necessary elements required to operate the course. These elements include public bathrooms, starting shed, ample parking, ample access, which we'll all review in a moment. If we can go back to the phasing for a moment, the previous one. Yep. So just to reiterate, we're here this evening to request that this Phase 1, which includes the components I'm going to discuss as well as the course. Phase 1A represents the new proposed maintenance building. We have an existing maintenance building, so we do not need this to operate the course for this upcoming summer. This will be a permanent structure that we felt would require more discussion, more due diligence. We respect the process. For us to lump this element into what we're requesting, we felt was a heavy lift. So we took a step back and we created its own independent phase, which we'll be pursuing this fall through the winter. It is important to note that although it's a separate phase, we do need to execute Phase 1A prior to commencing Phase 2. Phase 2 is the location where the existing maintenance building currently resides. So we'll be using that this year like it's always been used in the same capacity, but at some point, we'll need to move the equipment and that operation to a new facility so that we can push dirt and actually start the development in our Phase 2 and Phase 3 areas. And finally, Phases 2 and 3 represent that area A, which is the actual 60 plus minus acres of development. And, you know, as you can see or represented in our application, that development includes all the elements as described in the ordinance. We have open space, we have public space, we have connectivity. It connects the front to the back. One of the, you know, again, better features, I think, is we're able to connect to the East Bay bike path through the network of trails and walking and biking paths. So again, all those components are within Phases 2 and 3. You want to go to the next slide? This slide here represents the existing conditions out at Metacomet. And what we've done is we've overlaid our proposed improvements to operate a public course this upcoming summer. So just some of the elements to point out. The existing curb cut that is out on Veterans Memorial will be utilized again in the same way it's been utilized for the last 80 years. The parking field's consistent. You can even see the maintenance shed here. And then in the footprint of the old Metacomet clubhouse is where we are going to propose our actual golf operation. So within that footprint, there's a starting shed, a tent, bathroom facilities, and cart staging. If we can go to the next slide, please. Again, I just want to reiterate that what is here is the same complexion regarding golf that has been existing for the last 100 years out there. So we have the bag drop, we have the starting shed in the same area as I explained. I would note that we have been working with Rhode Island Energy, Cox Communication, the East Providence Building Department, Rob Walker specifically. We do have a pending building application for that 20 by 20 shed that would be used for transactions, greens fees, retail, golf-related retail. We'll have soft drinks and packaged food options for the players for the season. And the tent is provided for general space to allow the players to get out of the elements, whether it be too much sun or rain, et cetera. But again, it is all having to do with golf-related activity. Next slide, please. Okay. So I don't know if anybody had any questions regarding the setup that we're proposing or any of the structures or anything, I'd be more than happy to answer. Great. Want to bring up Robert?
Real quick, before we turn over to Robert McNeil, I did want to point this out because this planning board astutely raised some questions as to traffic and off-site improvements last month. So I did just want to let this board know that we do listen. So I did want to point this out for the board's edification. So if we could go to the next slide, please. As the board knows, I think we had a supplemental submission to both the Waterfront Commission, and this was a preliminary physical alteration permit that notification that was sent to DOT by Paul Bannon of Crossman Engineering, who's here with us tonight. And I just wanted to call out the traffic counts as it relates to the golf course, just to allay this board's and members of the public's concerns. So if we could go to the next slide, please. And the highlighting's a little off, but just so everyone can see what we're talking about, the trip generation summary table shows traffic counts at peak hours. So during the AM peak hour, the Crossman study estimates 13 cars coming in, 3 cars leaving, for a total of 16. At the PM peak hour for golf course, 14 vehicles entering, 12 vehicles exiting for a peak of 26. And then for Saturday peak hour, the golf course, 13 in, 14 out for a total of 27. And obviously the patronage is limited by virtue of it being a 9-hole public golf course. So there's a limited number of spaces, more than enough to park all the golfers that are there, but you won't have that same type of turnover. And again, it's the same, exists for the summer of 2024. It's the same configuration, same parking field, and same access way off of Veterans Memorial Parkway. But I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention as well. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Robert McNeil, who can speak as to some of the design elements that he has incorporated into the golf course by virtue of his redesign, as well as some preservation elements. And I hope you'll be as impressed with his presentation and his renderings as we are and have been as we get this course ready to play.
Sure. I do. Good evening. My name is Robert McNeil. I'm a golf course architect with the Northeast Golf Company right here in Rhode Island. Our office is in Saunderstown. We operate 3 other golf courses at the moment right now, one in Milford, Connecticut, Iona Golf Course, Kings Crossing in North Kingstown, and we also operate the Bristol Golf Park for the city of, or the town of Bristol in Connecticut. We came on board here at Metacomet in 2022, late 2022, and it was pretty exciting. I mean, I'm very familiar with Metacomet. We've designed, redesigned numerous Donald Ross golf courses, restored many, and this was a major responsibility as far as I was concerned. Metacomet has an incredible history, as we all know, both long ago and recent. So what could we do in a responsible way to bring this golf course back to life? And that's all we could think about, and how we could do it on this property, and at the same time preserve as much as we could of the existing historic routing of the golf course and features of the golf course. So that's what we did. If you want to move to I'm not sure what this first slide is, but here we go. So the golf course was kept, to the credit of Marshall Properties, was kept up. I mean, the golf course holes on the front 9 of the old Metacomet Country Club were maintained to a degree, not for play, but just the turf was maintained. So our vision and our goal was to maintain and utilize as much of the front 9 of the golf course as we possibly could. And we were able to utilize 7 holes within the front 9 of the facility, of the existing Metacomet. We created or reimagined 2 new holes that were consistent with the historic character of the property to create the new 9-hole Met Links property. So we'll go through a couple of the slides. That was number 9. I don't know if you're familiar with the golf course itself, but this particular hole here is one of the new holes that was built, which sits on the old 8th hole of the property, which was a par 4 that played around the corner over towards Fort Street. But now it's 2 holes. We've created 2 holes out of it. This is a short par 4, the new number 5 on the golf course, and the next hole will be number 6 along Fort. This is the 9th hole, which you saw before, which is the existing 9th hole that existed on Metacomet Country at Metacomet Country Club. We've restored the bunkering. We've restored all of the old fairway lines, tees. So this is as if it was 1925. We had all of the original Donald Ross 1925 plans, renovation plans. So we utilized as much as we could from those plans to recreate the golf course in that light. We also added a little touch of connectivity. So the entire feeling of the golf course is connected holes. So it's a small footprint, of course, but we made it even smaller and walkable, where you could play 1 hole and walk right to the next. So this is the 3rd and 4th holes. That's the existing 3rd green. Holes number 1, 2, and 3 are exactly the same as they were at Metacomet Country Club. And the 4th hole that you see right there is the old 7th hole from Metacomet Country Club. So we just rerouted. In a way, we recaptured the 4th hole or the 7th hole as the 4th. But we rebuilt all the bunkers. We regrassed around all the green complexes. We even utilized the existing greens from the holes that we were not using to build the new greens, the grass, the turf. So the golf course would be the same feeling throughout, as if it was 110 years old. Just a more pointed view of the new 5th hole up on top of the plateau. You're playing right directly towards Fort Street there. That's 5 and 6. You can see them both together. Aim. Here's an area which I call the horseshoe. So this is the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th holes that play around the ravine. And you're looking back towards the Providence River and the city and so forth, and the cove. It's a great spot on the property. This is behind the 6th green, looking back to the 5th. It's a spectacular property. The golf course turned out just wonderfully. Paul Jamrog, the superintendent out there, has done an incredible job in bringing this golf course back to life. and Marshall Properties took this very seriously. This was a very concerted effort and a responsible effort to get this done right. There's a whole new irrigation system on the golf course now, new cart paths, all new bunkers, new holes. That's the new 6th hole. Again, an overview of those holes up on top of the plateau. And the 9th hole. And the iconic 2nd hole we left just as it was, although we added what was lost. We brought bunkering back from the 1925 plans and aerials that we had, put those back in place, and now this is the 2nd hole as if it was 1925. Same with the bunkering you see on the hillside there, which is now our 8th hole, which was the 4th hole at Metacomet Country Club. We brought back the bunkers that were lost. It's been awesome. It's been an exciting a time to be a part of this property. We were so happy to be working with Marshall Properties, with Paul Jamrog, with NMP Golf Construction. Really create something very special, I think, for the residents of East Providence and anybody that plays this golf course. I believe, I'm biased, this is going to be a national story. It's going to be something that other municipalities are going to look to create internally inside of city limits. If you can create a 9-hole golf course inside of a city limit, you have quite an amenity for your residents to enjoy. And you got it here in East Providence.
Thank you. It looks beautiful, and I don't know who this question is best for. Is there going to be, how does the tee time?
No, so that's going to be it's called T-Snap. There's a variety of them, but one we're going to use here is called T-Snap. It's an online system. You can make it right on your phone. You can make it on the website, but it's all automated, and we receive them right at the golf course. You can call, you could drive up. A lot of ways to play, but it's all automated right now. Yes, yeah, there'll be a full staff there on a daily basis to receive players and get them off and entertain them.
Yeah, one question. Oops. Mr. McNeil, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit because this is actually part of the planning department's report. But on page 5 of that, maybe we'll discuss it now since you're right here. On the middle of page 5, it discusses the public walking path along the waterfront. And it says it is not likely feasible due to the potential physical injury risks associated with pedestrians being struck with golf balls during course play. I completely agree with that. Do you know of any golf courses, public or private, that allow people to go hiking around the golf course?
Well, there's a number of golf courses throughout the country that have walking trails that are part of the property as a whole. They do not run directly in the middle of the golf course or within the playable corridors of the golf course. They're normally adjacent to or within a wooded area adjacent to that is out of harm's way. The footprint here is so tight and small that, and golfers are not good. I can just tell you right now, they're not good.
I haven't.
Balls have a tendency to find
Right.
places that you don't even expect. And, in the essence, and I operate 4 golf courses, so it's, it's a serious situation when, people roam into a facility where there's projectiles that are essentially going through the air that, it's harm's way. I'm all for walking paths, but it's got to be a safe scenario. Certainly a golf course is not the perfect place for that.
But you don't see that designed in this course.
It is not right now. No.
All right. So would you say that, correctly stating that phrase, it's not just not likely feasible, it's not feasible.
I don't believe it's feasible on this
Okay.
property.
I wanted to make sure of that because this is something asked to act upon. If in fact this was approved with public access, and somebody wandered around the course enjoying themselves and got injured, hit by a golf ball, right? And as I understand it, a good tee shot, probably exceeding 100 miles an hour, right?
Yes.
Right? That could be a life-threatening situation.
Absolutely could.
Whose liability is that? Is it yours, ours, or both?
Well, I think,
We passed it.
yeah, I think it would be everybody's responsibility.
Yeah, I think so too. Thanks.
So I just wanted to add that over the previous few weeks, I've been working, trying to buy insurance for this operation. And I think you bring up a great point. This is private property that we're allowing public on. To have individuals not paying a greens fee and assuming the risk that goes along with that transaction, I think we would be liable. And I don't know if I'd be able to get insurance to allow the general public to walk in the path of play. It's just some discussions we've been having and been trying to set it up, but it's very dangerous in my estimation, proposition, the way this course presently lays out.
Did you look at, as you were designing, like you said, it's very tight, any feasible means of providing, say, a walking path along the cove or something like that? I mean, I'd be amazed if you saw it.
Yeah, no. So one of the features of this course is that hole number 2, which runs along the cove. That fairway is in play right up to the water's edge.
Right.
Strategically, from a golfer's perspective, you want to stay as close to that water's edge because it's the shortest distance to the hole.
Right.
So it's 100% in play all along the cove. I know now's not the time, but if you looked at our proposed development, we have a lot of walking trails and public spacing that is adjacent to this, overlooking the first 2 fairways. There's a lot of it. So we're open for discussions. I just don't, I can't support it.
Mr. Chairman.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, so just tonight, we're not, you said in the future, you're dealing with the facility shed and the walkways. So tonight, we're just going with the 9-hole golf course, correct? Thank you. Mr.
To follow up on that, we're saying the 9-hole golf course without walking trails and additional public access.
Yep.
The access is for golfers.
You're both correct. So
Okay.
9-hole golf course, as presently laid out, and not including the to-be constructed equipment shed, which is 1A, which we will be back at a later date to request a recommendation at that time.
And you're also working on the walkways, public space walkways, just not in the middle of the golf course.
So we have, so in our current proposal layout, we have, I believe, 2.5 acres, excuse me, of walkways throughout the development that are laid out. And in our DRC presentation last week, we showed additional bike paths that we created as well to enhance access to the bike path proper. And we received some very, I think, positive feedback on that element as well. When we come back to this board for a recommendation as to the overall development, and this came up at last month's presentation, we will be doing a separate, a fresh site plan review and submittal with our architect and our engineer that will show you all of the walking paths in which we've established connectivity to Veterans Memorial Parkway, as well as the existing and contemplated rather pedestrian and bicycle lanes that we already have laid out throughout the development, just not over the golf course.
Thank you. Just work in progress later on.
Exactly. Thank you.
Is that phase 2 or phase 3?
So that's a great question. So there are paths in phase 2 and phase 3. Phase 2 is the quadrant If we can go back a few slides, by the way, Mr. Crook makes a great point. So if we can go back a few slides. Or not. So if you go to your handout and what did you say? With the swaying, yeah, I know. I appreciate it. Everyone's so thoughtful. So if you go back to your phasing plan, perfect. So phase 2, which is the first phase of improved property, is one that, that's the first build out, I think, over years 1 to 5 following approval. That has the majority and the build out access to the bike path, to Veterans Memorial Parkway. And when we come back for our overall recommendation, we will be showing you the layout of those paths. There are also paths that that are contemplated in phase 3 as well. And we are certainly open to making sure that to the extent viable in the development process, so we don't have to rip up and dig out, that there is consistent access from one end to the other. We certainly intend that. We're not looking to defray or postpone those improvements as well for the public benefit, understanding how important they are. So, but phase 2, which is the first improved phase, has the majority of that build out for pedestrian and bicycle access.
Not? No?
Thank you very much.
That conclude your presentation on behalf of the applicant? Mike?
That concludes our presentation on behalf of the applicant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Steve, can we hear the staff's recommendation?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. Our department prepared a memorandum about the consistency of the phase 1 portion of this application with the comprehensive plan and with the land development and subdivision review regulations. The planning board's role in this development, as you know, is to offer an advisory recommendation to the Waterfront Commission and the Design Review Committee as to whether the proposed 9-hole public golf course is consistent with the purposes and intent of the city's comprehensive plan and subdivision regulations. The applicants have gone over what this part of their application entails. So as stated in our memo, we find that this phase here, phase 1, complies with or is consistent with several goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. We've been talking about the main point of contention, which you might hear from the public later tonight, is whether the applicant meets the objective 3.1, which is to require pedestrian access to the waterfront as part of any private mixed-use development in waterfront areas. The DRC, as was noted, did add the condition to come back and talk about that in the next year. And as we were saying, I agree philosophically about public open space should be as open to the public as can be. I don't see how it could really be added safely here on this site with the golf course being pre-existing. If this was, for example, farmland where someone was looking to develop a golf course and development, it may be a different story of trying to design it in that way, but we are dealing with a golf course that's pre-existing under these tight circumstances. So we found also that the application here is consistent with the purposes of the land development and subdivision review regulations. So our recommendation is based upon the above analysis and review of the submitted development proposal. The planning department recommends that the planning board offer an advisory opinion to the DRC and Waterfront Commission that the proposed 9-hole public golf course use is fully consistent with the purposes and intent of the city's 2010-2015 comprehensive plan and with section 1-2 general purposes of the subdivision and land development review regulation. No.
Any members of the public wish to be heard? As you can hear, before knows it's the fourth time that public comment to be heard. Deal?
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your time. Good evening. The Marshall family and architect Robert McNeil are justifiably proud of the new 9-hole golf course at Metacomet. It is beautiful and will be a great amenity to current East Providence residents and those to come. That said, it is the opinion of Keep Metacomet Green that without walking trails, the course does not provide adequate access to the waterfront by the public. Thus, it does not currently meet the standards of the city comprehensive plan, which calls for preserving and expanding public access to the city's waterfront for passive and active recreational activities by requiring pedestrian access to the waterfront as part of a private mixed-use development in the waterfront areas, as has been noted earlier. As well, the Waterfront District's own 2003 plan, which is incorporated into the comprehensive plan, calls for year-round public access to the waterfront via integrated multimodal and intermodal circulation routes to the waterfront. The Planning Department's May 8th memo, to which Mr. Brines just referred, memo to the board, calls walking paths through the golf course, quote, not likely feasible, end quote, and unfettered access to the waterfront, quote, impractical. The memo adds that, quote, the proposed 9-hole golf course will provide pedestrian access to the public through paid golf fees, end quote. KMG believes that requiring the public to pay for its rightful access to the waterfront is contrary to the intention of both the comprehensive plan and the waterfront district plan. KMG has shown that a number of golf courses have successfully integrated walking paths using safety measures such as cautionary signage and netting in potentially dangerous areas. As for liability, if golfers assume the risks inherent in playing on a golf course, then pedestrians must as well. That said, KMG is pleased that Marshall Properties agreed at the recent Design Review Committee hearing to a public discussion before the end of the year of the feasibility of walking paths on the course. We are also grateful to the DRC for acknowledging this issue by adding a proviso to this effect to their recommendation for approval to the Planning Board and the full Waterfront Commission. Finally, we are happy to hear that Marshall plans to revisit the design and location of its proposed golf course maintenance facility. In conclusion, we wish to clear up any misperception of what we mean by a study. We are not speaking of anyone retaining experts to compile a 40-page report that would necessitate a peer review. We are speaking of a discussion around a conference table, much like what must have been done during the pre-application design workshops with the developer, commission, and planning department staff in attendance. Only this time, interested members of the public would also have a seat at the table. I thank you for your time.
Anyone else? State your name and address for the record.
Linda Leet from Riverside, and I've talked about this before. I see no reason why we can't walk on the golf course or on the roads that go through the golf course during the off season, or maybe in the evening to gaze at stars and things like that. They said it would be unable to do that, but I go skiing over at Rhode Island Country Club. I go to Goddard Park. Nobody ever seems to have a problem with it. So I'd just like to make that comment. Thank you.
Typically, the applicant want to work. Anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank the board for its consideration of this issue. We obviously rely upon the recommendation of the planning department, which mirrors the recommendation by our planning consultant. And we think that this board has asked the right questions and has identified the issues in hand. And, you know, obviously I'm repeating what I referred, what the, I believe the April 24 planning recommendation said previously, but obviously before my clients purchased the property, there was no public access to Metacomet. And now there will be, and there will be access to it from one end to the other. And to access the golf course, you by necessity have to pay the fees, and you have to assume some degree of risk, and that is the protocol that's aligned with that process. And we are comfortable that we have done everything within our power to meet the goals of and objectives of the comprehensive plan, and we very much hope that this board feels similarly. Thank you very much.
Okay, before we take any votes, advisory opinion, is there a motion to accept the vote?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Grant, I'm sorry, by Mr. Grant, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Mr. Chairman? I'd like to make a motion that the planning board offer an advisory opinion to the DRC and Waterfront Commission that the proposed 9-hole public golf course use is fully consistent with the purposes and intent of the city's 2010-2015 comprehensive plan and with section 1-2, general purposes of the subdivision and land development review regulation.
Motion by Mr. Grant, second by Mr. Rockwell. I'll just note, that perspective, very positive. This overall development. I'm excited to see the pictures, beautiful, very much. Positive. I will, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I've obviously raised a number of objections on occasion throughout this process. But I do have to say that the developers did more than adequately answer my concerns this evening. And so I too will be supporting it.
No further discussion. I'll call for a vote. A motion by Mr. Grant, seconded by Mr. Rockwell, by favorable advisory opinion of the DRC and Waterfront regarding the consistency of comprehensive general. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
What is the proposed? For the board?
Why don't you ask about that website now?
Yeah, right. Okay, moving on. Item B on the agenda is a public hearing on proposed amendments to the city's subdivision and land development new regulations regarding outdoor dining. Proposal would amend Article 10, Development Plan Review, and Article 11, Land Development Projects, and Development Plan Review use of activities, add outdoor dining, restaurants, food restaurants, an activity requiring submission of development plan review. Keith, we have enclosures on this?
Yes, there's a memo dated May 8th from our office to the board. So this hearing is for minor changes to the subdivision regulations that correspond to the changes to the zoning ordinance that were approved by the city council at their meeting last week on May 7th. These were changes that were recommended by the planning board at your April 8th meeting. And these are changes that provided parking relief for outdoor dining at food service establishments and establish outdoor dining as an activity that needs development plan review or a DPR application. So these proposed changes, as you see, they're just a few sentences added to the subdivision regulations that simply add outdoor dining to the list of uses that require development plan review in Article 10 and 11 of those regulations. Per state law and local regs, a public hearing is needed to amend the subdivision regulations, even if it's a tiny change like this. Our recommendation is that these changes are consistent with the comprehensive plan, the purposes of the subdivision regulations, and the purposes of zoning. And both this board and the city council agreed that the changes to zoning corresponded with those findings. So our recommended motions here is to enter the following into the record. The planning department's memo dated May 8th. Proposed outdoor dining, land development, and subdivision review regulation amendments dated April 9th, 2024. Motion number 2 would be to adopt staff's findings of consistency with the comprehensive plan as spelled out in staff's May 8th memorandum. Motion 3 would be to adopt staff's findings of consistency with the general purposes of the land development and subdivision review regulations as spelled out in staff's May 8th memorandum. Recommended motion 4 would be to adopt staff's findings of consistency with the purposes of zoning as spelled out in staff's May 8th memorandum. And recommended motion 5 would be to adopt the proposed amendments to the land development and subdivision review regulations as submitted.
Any discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think this is great. Whatever we can do to help these small business eateries out, whatever we can do to help them out. I mean, I don't know if there's any big restrictions. There's some at the council meeting the other night. Some of them were like bollards in front of the areas so cars don't hit them. I think you have to go in for another application or a permit if somebody wants to outdoor dine and have an adult beverage. Whatever we can do to help these poor people out, I'm all for.
Yeah. Mr. Barnes, are there any changes of note since we reviewed this entire package, I guess a month or 2 ago?
No, and the city council adopted the changes you recommended as submitted. So they adopted the changes to zoning. These changes here would just be to add outdoor dining as a development plan review use in the subdivision regulations.
Which we had also discussed.
We discussed it in general.
Okay.
These